Recording in
28th.
progress.
And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Scott.
Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
Flag. United States of America. To the republic.
To the republic, which is stands
One nation.
under God, indivisible,
Liberty.
liberty,
Justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everybody. First item of business is open forum. Strangely, I have nothing for open forum tonight. I know that Jody does have something for open forum, so let me turn it over to her.
Thank you. So I wanted to thank Julie Brine, who lives at 39 Lawson Road. She presented me with this book. Kind of hard to see it there, which is a history of Westford. We don't have many copies in Westford, and so obviously we'll keep this at the town hall, but this was written by Reverend Edwin Hodgman, and it was Westford from 1659 to 1883. So very interesting book. Here's a picture of him. And I want to thank Julie Brine for giving this to us, and we will display it proudly. And I am sending her a thank you note too.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Julie. We appreciate it. Does anybody from the board have anything for open forum? I don't see any, and I don't see anybody, any of our attendees who have their hands up for open forum. So moving right along. We are at 7:05. Well, we have to wait a few minutes because we're a little early for our public hearing. So why don't we, Scott?
Since we have a minute, I mean, so the town formed a commission on disabilities about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and right now we find ourselves short members to the point of really making a quorum. So, it's a really important thing to have in town for our, children up through elderly or anybody in between who's got any kind of physical, mental, cognitive disability. To have a commission that looks at our properties, our plans, our new developments and so forth, with an eye towards improving our accessibility. So if you have any interest at all, please let Judy know. She tracks all the applications, but we'd love to have, if you're a disabled person yourself, have a disabled child, care for disabled, any kind of connection, we'd love to have you as part of that commission. So thanks.
Okay. All right, we still have a couple of minutes. Tom?
I can remind folks that the WestfordCAT annual meeting is 6 p.m. at the WestfordCAT offices this Thursday, June 30th. So please come join us and learn more about what WestfordCAT's doing to support the community. Okay.
All right, I think we're just about there. We may be 30 seconds early, but we'll go with it. We have a public hearing, which is a request for a transfer of a general law, chapter 138, section 15, all alcohol package store license from Malvis Enterprises, Inc., doing business as Westford Wine and Spirits at 9 Cornerstone Square, to VF Wine and Spirits Corp., doing business as Westford Wine and Spirits, 9 Cornerstone Square. I guess, is Patty with us tonight? Is everything in order? I know she is with us tonight. Tom?
Madam Chair, would you like a motion to open the?
Yes, I would. Could we have a motion to open the public hearing? So, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Tom. All those in favor, Scott?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Scott? Anita?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now, Patty, thank you for joining us tonight. I know you're on vacation. Is everything in order? I'm sorry, we missed what you said. You're muted.
Okay.
I'm back. Here I am. Yes,
Okay.
everything is in. I've had a heck of a time trying to get on. It must be vacation brain. Yes, everything is in order. We will miss V. He's a great guy over there at Westford Wine and Spirits. Been a good neighbor.
Okay. All right. Seeing that, is there a motion to approve the transfer?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, Scott,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mr. Patel, I see that you are on. The transfer's been approved, so welcome to Westford and good luck. Okay, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Scott,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're at our 7:10 PM item, which is the consent agenda. We have a request to approve the following: a special license for the Great Gatsby Galaphone fundraiser. The applicant is Marcia Stokes on behalf of Westford Friends of East Boston Camps. The location is at East Boston Camps on Saturday, September 10th from 6 to 10 p.m. A flag hoisting event for India's Independence Day, hoisting the Indian flag. The applicant is Narain Buksamusa on behalf of the India Association of Greater Boston. The location is the temporary flagpole on Town Common. The date is Sunday, August 7th, 2022. And then we have last a vow renewal wedding ceremony on Town Common. The applicant is James Ticknell. The date is Saturday, June 3rd, 2023, from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I have my amendment plans in advance, and yes, I make a motion to approve the agenda subject to public safety comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, John,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
All right. We are now at our 7:15 p.m. item, which is to consider entering litigation on behalf of the town of Westford private well owners related to PFAS multi-district litigation. This is, as you recall, a continuation of our discussion from 2 weeks ago. At that point in time, we talked about entering litigation on behalf of the water takers of Westford, but also raised at that meeting was whether or not we were going to also enter into litigation or agree to enter into litigation on behalf of the folks here in Westford who own private wells. And I think the key issue, the main issue for us was whether or not we were going to do this under one contract with the law firm or have two separate contracts. Since that time, we actually have spoken to town council, and we've also spoken to Hank Naughton, who is the attorney from Napoli and Skolnick, who would be the law firm that would be representing us. And I think it is the opinion that only one agreement is necessary for the town, because after all, we are one town, and whether you are on town water or on a private well, we're all getting our water from the same place. And so we felt that one agreement was acceptable. That being said, if we recover in the lawsuit, and if there is a recovery, then there can be an allocation of the sums of monies that we receive between the water enterprise and private well takers. And we could internally enter into an MOU with the water department that sets out how any funds that we may receive would be allocated between and amongst us. So that's kind of the setting and the background and what's been recommended to us. So I don't know if I know that Hank, Steve Cronin, and Mark Warren are with us. I don't know if any one of you would like to add to that or comment on that. Steve?
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, since your last meeting, we've received notification from the EPA that they've actually lowered the interim health advisory levels for PFOA and PFAS to 0.004 parts per trillion and 0.02 parts per trillion for PFAS, which is significantly lower than their health advisory of 70 parts per trillion that was established in 2006. Now, in Massachusetts, the DEP has primacy, so the current standard of 20 is what we're operating under. However, we've been told by EPA that they do plan to establish a proposed standard by fall of 2022, and hopefully that, or for them anyway, that'll go into effect in fall of 2023. So as far as the current standard of 20, we do anticipate that Mass will adopt significantly lower standards at some point in the near future based on this information. So, we've been working with the health department and with Ray Dick to get some information out to the public on these new advisories so that they're aware. But it's almost a certainty that some well owners here in town will be impacted at some point by this. So, from my standpoint, I think it certainly makes sense for the town to enter into this agreement as a whole.
Thanks. Other comments or questions from the board? Tom?
I agree. This seems like the right course. How and when does the MOU between us and the water department get developed? Is that something that we've got plenty of time to take on?
Jody?
Yes, I would say if the board would like to entertain an MOU, we can get working on that now and get something drafted to propose to, with the water commissioners, but to propose to the select board. So we have done MOUs with the water commissioners before, so it's not something that we're not used to doing.
Right, I think we did one with respect to the fire training facility that's being built on water department land. So I think we can do that again. So yeah. Okay, other questions or comments?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, it's Hank Norton. And I'll just point out for any concerns about the distinction between the enterprise fund and the town and the well owners. Our team will be working with the town, our environmental team, and all of our lawyers that draft the complaints to establish the damages should be attributable to what's coming from the 75% of the town provided water and what's coming from the well owners. So there really shouldn't be a concern about the ability to point out what's coming from where, as long as the testing is done and we can gather the data that we use in drafting the complaint and then arguing for damages and remediation costs on behalf of the town. So administratively, from our viewpoint, this really is the way to go, and will be helpful to us as we go forward in arguing the case on behalf of the entire town of Westford.
Great, thank you. All right, so Scott?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So if there's essentially the enterprise fund and the well owners in one action, if it's a settlement, does that become a function of per capita distribution on, enterprise users? And I mean, how do you then, determine that, who gets what to come out whole?
Hank, do you want to answer that or try?
Sure. You, after you approve the retainer this evening, that's when we get to work. And it'll be, you'll over the next few days or however, execute the MOU. We argue based on the evidence that you give us that our team will work with you to gather. But we would hope, as with other clients, we'll have a good idea of what it's going to cost to remediate the town water, and after testing commences, what it's going to cost to remediate the wells. So we point to that, and those percent that will turn into a whole figure, and you'll be able to break down the percentages of the remediation costs, and that's what we will argue for. That the whole figure is what we will argue for on behalf of the town. Our goal is to get you 100%, but that will be decided by the court on the percentages that get distributed. But we will be arguing on behalf of the whole town, and we'll have those figures if everything works out the way we believe they will. We'll have specific figures of what goes in what direction, and then it'll be up to the town to administer that. I hope that answered your question, Scott.
I guess, I mean, in other towns that do this, is there a representative of the well owners that is involved in these discussions, or does the town just sort of speak for everybody?
Well, that's up to you. That's up to the individual entity. If from an administrative viewpoint for us in the evidence gathering and in the complaint drafting, it really would be helpful to be able to deal with one entity, or it might be a group, but basically the town speaking as a whole on behalf of all the water users in the town. It's not going to be. Data is what I think is going to be the best administrative remedy here. We're going to rely on the town to gather all of the information, both from the 75% of the town that's on town water and the 25% of the town residents that use wells if they want to participate.
In fact, I'm on town water, but I'm just thinking of if there's anybody listening tonight that is on a well, I just want them to know how they're going to be, spoken for. So that's just trying to be clear on that. That's all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's up to the town. That's up to you guys.
Jody?
Yes, so I guess there's going to be a lot of conversation about this, a lot of meetings, a lot of decisions. I mean, if you recall back in 2008, when the perchlorate plume started, we had a lot of public meetings, and we coordinated it. So there's going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made in the future of how the board wants to handle this. And of course, the Board of Health will be heavily involved. So we just don't know how widespread this problem is. But when the perchlorate plume came, the town coordinated the testing and the response. And of course, we sought a settlement too, but the select board are going to have to decide, and we'll bring you the data when we get it. It's still a ways off. So I don't think every man for himself is probably going to work too well. So it did work pretty well with perchlorate that we coordinated that. And that was my office. And we met a lot of people and had a lot of fun working on that for the last 14 years. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Tom?
If you're ready for a motion, I can take a stab at it.
Sure.
Okay. So I move to enter litigation on behalf of the town of Westford, on behalf of both the Westford water takers and the private owners, well owners, for the PFAS multi-district litigation as outlined in the retainer agreement in our packet.
Can we add to the motion and to work on in the future a memorandum of understanding between the town and between the water department and the well owners in terms of allocation of the costs, allocations of any recovery?
Of course.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. All right, Jody?
Just to clarify, the agreement that's in your packet does not include the water takers because you haven't voted that yet. We will amend it to include that, but I am seeking a vote, which you may want to take after this on the first contract listed in your packet, but we will amend it to include the water takers. Thank you.
Okay, so let's vote on this one first, and then we'll take that contract out of order and do that now after this vote. And then we'll only have, 12 contracts to consider later on as opposed to 13 or whatever the number is. So anyway, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So then going to the retainer agreement that we received from Napoli and Skolnick for litigation services related to PFAS in the amount of a contingency fee of 25% of the sum recovered as requested by the town manager's office. With the amendment that we add the private well owners to that contract. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Let's get a second and then are you seconding, John, or do you have a question?
No, I have a question.
All right, well, let's get a second and then I'll take your question.
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John?
Well, this is essentially the same document that we're asking to be signed, the same document that was initially put forward as a draft. And I just wondered, has town council looked at this?
Jody?
I'm sorry.
Yes, actually, this contract was coordinated with town council, and I did have them review it again this week, and they are on board.
Well, I had one question on paragraph 2 there. It's costed and expensive. And this is on a contingent basis. Unless recovery is made, there will be no obligation. But say recovery is made and it doesn't cover all the expenses, what happens then? It looks like we'd be responsible for costs and expenses incurred in the handling of the case if a recovery is made. That depends on the size of the recovery?
We have never had a case where expenses exceeded the recovery. And
Okay,
we don't anticipate the expenses actually to be very onerous at all. Because they're spread, the expenses are spread across all plaintiffs, of which there are approaching 700 now.
okay. All right, that's all. Thanks.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, Hank, Steve, and Mark. And we will be in touch with the water department to start working on an MOU after the holiday. Okay. Good
Thank
night,
you. Look forward to working with you. Have a great 4th of
Thank you.
July.
Good night. Everybody have a nice evening. Okay. We are at our 7:25 p.m. item, which is a discussion of the results of the recreation and aquatics feasibility study and to consider support for locations on Farmer Way or 25 Depot Street, Fisher Way, and consider next steps. So Chris Barrett, who's the chair of Parks and Recreation, I believe is going to give the presentation tonight, or I think him and perhaps the consultant are going to do it. So Chris, good evening and go ahead.
Great. Thank you for having me. Just a brief correction. I'm actually not the chair of the Park Rec Commission. I'm the vice chair. But with that, that's okay.
My notes said chair, sorry.
I know, I saw that. Yep. I also want to bring into the call, and I think they're coming on now, Gary Coccoluto from FM Architecture and Stu Isaac from the Isaac Sports Group. They are going to help me out in the presentation this evening. So the presentation is going to be very brief. We are going to focus on proposed site locations, what type of amenities a rec center could offer, possible implementation models, and recommendations for next steps. The study contains much more detail than we'll be able to cover this evening, so I want to let people know on the call that all the past presentations we've given on the study this year, as well as the study itself, is available on the Park and Recreation Commission section of the town's website. I also want to publicly thank all the members of the public, boards and committee members and town staff who have helped out on the study so far. And I also want to thank the Westford Academy swim team captains who put together a petition for supporting this effort. It was very gratifying to see that as of this evening, over 500 people have signed a petition in support of a recreation center in Westford. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Stu.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. If we can go to the next slide. What I wanted to do is just very briefly review the objectives of our study. And I want you to understand that these objectives really also outline the order of process that we went through in the study. First of all, identifying community and stakeholder needs and opportunities and objectives. Then going into a market analysis of the facilities in Westford, facilities current residents are using, and facilities outside Westford in the region that have an impact on this study. Then we developed the program model and then the scheduling around that, because program really precedes design. Once we understand what that program model and the opportunities look like, then we can go into the design concept. And that's where we developed some initial content to the design, and then FM architecture took over from there on design detail. Next, once we have the design, go into identifying and evaluating site options, developing cost projections, but then developing ownership, management, and staffing models. Who would run it? What are the different scenarios that could really run this and fund this facility? Then we go into developing a financial operating projections for the different both design and management options. And that includes 5-year annual projections, long-term capital replacement and maintenance reserve projections. We took a look at economic analysis, economic impact in the community, and then providing recommendations and strategic direction for the aquatic and recreational center next steps. If we go to the next slide, one of the very most important parts of this was identifying what we need. The top priority was an aquatic facility. This is shown in the previous recreation master plans, as well as community engagement. But what came across is that it's not just a need for a pool, but an aquatic program, a full range of activities, which usually requires 2 pools with different water temperature and depths to really have a full integrated aquatic program. Ice arena, no ice facility in Westford. Our user groups and our youth hockey and figure skating are all using other facilities. But we thought that with a facility in town, much better access for the public, all those grassroots skating lessons, everything that builds up from there. The importance of an accessible indoor walking track, that came across loud and clear across many user groups. Fitness areas, that's not a expansive fitness center. We've got a lot of those privately in the Westford, but an area for training and workout space to support the users and teams and members of the rec center. A gymnasium, we have a lot of gym space at the Millworks, but we still have identified there's needs for overflow, needs the school district can't fulfill. And then finally, some multi-purpose function and meeting space within the facility to support the classes, the programs, all the things that happen within the facility. It can be team rooms, it can be life-saving classes. And then with that space, that when it's not being used for specific programs, to support general community use. So from there, developing that phase, then we turn it over to Gary with FM architecture to talk about how that translates into the development of the design. So Gary, if you can take it from there. Do we have Gary?
Eric, is Gary on? Oh,
I
am here. Can you not see? Can you folks not hear me? Good evening.
Oh,
we can hear you now.
can. Now we see. Okay, excellent.
Wonderful. If we could jump to the next slide, please. So how all these bits and pieces fit together, this is a feasibility study and not a full building design, but the goal was to take the components of the study that Stu had just outlined, the aquatics, the ice arena, gymnasium, and make sure we had at least a reasonable diagram of how these pieces would fit together. So as we studied different opportunities for this and looking at some of the sites in town, we looked at building a 2-story building model. And again, this is not really an architectural plan. It's a way the bits and pieces of the program can fit together. There is enough square footage in this program that suggests a 2-story model is the more efficient way to build this. There's also enough 2-story program area. The large pool is generally a 2-story space. The gymnasium is a 2-story space. Hockey tends to be single floor, but it's a large volume, and so you can add a second floor. And so the diagram works out quite well with the main program venues on a first floor and the second floor supporting spectator seating for the pool, spectator seating for the hockey arena, and lots of space for walking track options. So we put together a series of building models that show this intent. Next one, please. So, and also where would this go? We started looking around the community at town-owned parcels of land, searching high and low in all areas, looking a lot of GIS, on-site work, investigative work with our partner, Meisner Brehm, civil engineers located in town. And we looked at a number of key factors, the location in town, what traffic implications were, adjacencies, neighborhoods, wetlands and floodplain, slope conditions and soils, a lot of that to work with, obviously, in water and slopes in Westford, and impacts on abutters. And if we can look at the next slide, we'll see where those sites turned up. We focused in on 7 potential sites. The map on this slide shows those numbered 1 through 7 spread all across town. The vast majority of these were Recreation Commission lands, but they were not all. Some parcels are select board controlled. Some parcels were school board controlled. We assessed each of the parcels with a score, looking at all of those assessment criteria, a weighted score for each. And 2 parcels came out on top. One is the Farmer Way parcel with a sort of over and above score of anything else, well above anything else. The second was the Abbott School parcel, which tied and was very close to a pair of other parcels, but had a number of amenities, which drove that as our second choice option for a site. Both, by coincidence, happened to be school board controlled pieces of land in or adjacent to school board controlled pieces of land. We can go to the next slide, please. So Farmer Way, and this is adjacent to the Stony Brook Middle School, of course, there are 2 parcels, lots 110 and 113, which are effectively joined. They're both town-owned and select board controlled. These are on the east side of Farmer's Way. And if you pull down the road, you'll notice them. They're heavily wooded. There's some topography right along the roadway. And we've developed a series of diagrams, 4 different diagrams that showed how that same building concept might be able to fit on the site. It's an awkward shaped parcel, to be sure. And so it has some challenges to build on it, but it is certainly a developable site. And for each of our concepts, we'll just share a few here. We developed a list of advantages and disadvantages with those site opportunities. What we noticed more significantly as we studied Farmer Way, if we go to the next slide, is that there's a wonderfully buildable parcel immediately on the other side of the road, on the west side of Farmer Way. This is lot 2. The actual address is 2 Farmer Way. It's a field parcel under the control of the school committee. And it has 2 play fields on that, 2 lacrosse-sized play fields. So we started looking at saying, well, what happens if you looked at building opportunities on this site? A would relocate those 2 fields, which locate well up onto the lot 110, 113 site. You can see those in the right-hand side of the screen. Those fields have been relocated. And it gives a lot more flexibility for how you would arrange a building and even parking amenities on this site. And had, as you can see, the advantages and disadvantages list here. It's a much longer advantages list for this side of the site. And so there's a lot of focus on this lot 2 area of Farmer Way. Unique about this one piece I'll just briefly add is it does allow a 2 hockey rink arrangement. So we'll talk about that, and Stu will touch base on that a little bit later in our presentation. But this larger flat parcel, more regularly shaped parcel affords that building potential. The next slide, please. And we also looked another 4 diagrams we developed looking at the Abbott School property. This one particular concept worked on a much tighter building footprint given the available building area. It's still all the same components and architectural components, but they were compacted as much as we could reasonably compact all of that program space to still reserve one of the two fields at Memorial Field and to keep our building as far remote from the Abbott School and Millennium School uses as possible. And in this particular diagram was unique among the four we developed in that it proposes the relocation of Fisher Way once you get on the Abbott School parcel. So it doesn't touch any of the residential areas aspects of Fisher Way, but once you're on the Abbott School property, it redirects that out and around so you have a more contiguous building parcel. And those were the two sites and really the concepts, the leading concepts for each of those two sites that have been developed during the study. I think we'll turn this back to Stu. Thank you if you'd like to talk about some of your ownership opportunities here.
Stu, I believe you're on mute. We can't hear you.
I'm now unmuted.
Okay.
So by far as we looked at the options, the preferred option was a private developer funded and operated with a land lease with the town. This is these public-private partnerships we see are much more popular these days as it's becoming harder and harder for a town or a municipality to build a large facility like this on their own. One of the keys is that it has to ensure meeting the Westford priorities and objectives. It needs to include all the elements, and it needs to be profitable to the developer, which is where we get into the challenges, which we'll talk about on the next slide. A good example recently done was the Boston Sports Institute, which was this very same model done in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where the town of Wellesley put out an RFP with developers, and they got this proposal, several proposals, and this has worked out well. It's been profitable. It's been great for the town. And again, it's built with a land lease on town land. The other options were town driven. One is the traditional model. The town funds it, owns it, operates it. Again, an example would be BD Swim and Fitness Center in Concord. The other option would be the town funds, but outsources the management and operations. An example I've listed, a very good example in New England, is Cornerstone Aquatic Center in West Hartford. So these were the options, with by far the private developer funding the project and running it really the best option. If we go to the next slide. So the conclusions when we did the financial analysis, keep in mind the private developer business model is profit driven. It has to be a model that works for them. Some advantages. The cost of a private project construction is considerably less than if it's a town-owned construction project, perhaps 20 to 25% of the total project costs. Looking at the operations, we projected a direct net operating revenue over $1 million by year 2 of net revenue, but that doesn't include debt service and property tax. So because it's tough to pin that down, because any private developer has numerous permutations and variables in how they fund it and how they operate it. We don't think the business model supports in most of those cases the necessary debt service and property tax with just a single sheet of ice. We looked at if a developer would want to add a second sheet like the developer in Wellesley did, it would generate another $660-some thousand in net revenue, which would then get them over the hump of supporting increased debt service and property tax and be a profitable operation. The keys to success in a private development like this is the negotiations between the town and the developer on land lease and property taxes to provide the incentives for a private developer to incorporate and balance all the town priorities, objectives, and residential discounts for residents, priority time for Westford Academy teams, access to community programs. When we do all that, the private development is feasible and attractive with these options for a second ice sheet and the negotiated developer incentives to meet the town needs and priorities. If we go to the next slide, I want to turn this back to Chris to just talk about really the next steps and the select board asks that came out of this feasibility study.
Great, thank you, Stu. So we've been a long time coming to this particular juncture. For those of you who aren't aware, this conversation about an aquatic center in town came up in the 2003 Recreation Master Plan and the 2016 Recreation Master Plan. We had a town-wide survey in 2017, strong support for a recreation center aquatics facility. And so that leads us to here. So we've done this study now. And so what's sort of the next things we're looking to do? Well, one of the most important parts of the study, as you heard this evening, was to identify where could a facility possibly be located. So we've brought these parcels up to the school committee. They had expressed interest or preference, I should say, in the Farmer Way parcel, particularly the option in which the facility is located on the west side of Farmer Way. But what we need from town leadership at this point is some approval to continue studying these parcels and looking to see if this will continue to make sense. One of the ways that we feel is the lowest cost, lowest effort way of getting more information is to issue a request for interest. And this is simply a document that would contain, some high-level objectives that the town may have as provided by this feasibility study for running and building a recreation center in the town. Based off of any responses we get from that RFI, we would then determine what the next steps would be. So we would anticipate bringing that information back to the select board, back to the school committee, and any other relevant boards that we need to, get some impact from, and then discuss potentially what would we do next. That might be an RFP, as you heard Stu mention earlier, about how the town of Wellesley move forward with their project. So hopefully this evening, we've given you enough information in this presentation. And obviously, if you hopefully have had a time to look at the study and you feel comfortable with potentially supporting these two requests. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you all for that presentation, and certainly Chris and the Rec Commission and everybody else who has worked on this and provided information. Thank you. It is quite clear from the presentation that a lot of time and effort and work and information and people have participated in this. This is a high level presentation of all of the work for, as Chris said, for anybody who is interested. The study itself is, I believe, 120 pages long, is on the website for folks to take a look at and read if they're so interested, or they can just simply read the executive summary, which is only 14 pages long. Again, I just want to thank everybody, for their commitment to this, because as Chris said, this has been an ongoing project for, since the early 2000s. With that, let me ask first for comments from the board, and then I will certainly go to questions and comments from folks who are watching. So Scott?
So first, Chris, I'll echo Andrea's thanks. I can remember was it 5 years ago? I think you were in front of us talking about an aquatic center, and here we are 5 years later with nothing still, really to show for that, but a lot of work. So thank you for the work and actually your patience. I think some really obvious comments to me. I mean, there's no good place for something this size, but Fisher Way is, to me, just a really, really bad idea. So I would encourage you personally just to drop that from your specs. And I guess the question would be if it was Farmer's Way and there was on the western side, who pays to move the ball fields? Is that on the developer's docket, or is there could be a request to the town to do that? Don't need to answer that. That's like the question that maybe you don't answer, maybe you don't, but there's a lot of money involved to move those fields.
Yes, it's a great question, Scott. Thank you. I believe that would be something that we would lay out in the RFI and just see how developers respond to it. It may be that that's something that they might be willing to entertain doing. Maybe they would do it as part of, having the opportunity to lease some of those fields out during certain times of the year, working in conjunction with the town, for example, so that they can recover some revenue. But, I think it's definitely a question that we would want to throw onto that RFI and see what we get answers on for.
And I mean, to me, it's also to me at least, it's a no-brainer. I don't want the town involved in running the center because we're not big enough to do that. Let the professionals do it if that's what we wanted to do. But I guess my other question is, I look at Wellesley and I appreciate that it's quasi-local, but actually surprisingly, Wellesley's population is only 29,000. The other much bigger than us, we're 24. So the two town sizes aren't that different, but Wellesley draws from Natick, Newton, 169,000 population in those communities. We draw from Groton, Carlisle, Chelmsford, publish of 67,000. We got like 1/3 the draw that Wellesley has. Is that, I guess, is the Wellesley plan really comparable to us given the scale of demographics?
Stu, it looks like you want to chime in.
Yeah, I can chime into that. We actually, in the report, had a pretty detailed breakdown of our projected usage from what we call the neighboring towns, Chelmsford and Littleton, then the first ring and the second ring. And there's much less density around Westford in aquatic facilities in particular than there was in Wellesley. So when I look at what's available out there and the actual market footprint, what we call the catchment area, we actually think that it can draw significantly from our the region, the outlying towns, even with the Westford residents still having priority use, priority registration for programs and things. So we felt the model was pretty comparable. We actually worked on that Wellesley project, both as the town as a client, and then with the RFP and trying to work with the developer that eventually built it. So we have a good sense of where they were drawing from. And we think it's, it may not be quite as much, but it's pretty darn close. And I think that the financial models match up relatively similarly, and as did the priority use that were allowed to Wellesley user groups and schools.
I guess just two final thoughts. One is, I'm sure that when Wellesley built theirs, interest rates were at what, 3%, and this will be, we're looking at what, 8 or 9 or something. So will it make, I mean, again, don't answer tonight, but will it make sense given, I think, current reality? And this, the final thought was, possibly ahead of the game, but as a community, we're looking at net zero. Can you build a net zero hockey rink or swimming pool? That seems to be a pretty energy intensive facility. So I figured I'd throw out there in the part of our CSAC committee and get it up in front of you.
That's going to be a question for Gary. I'll give him a chance to jump on and answer that, Scott. And as far as the interest rate question, again, great question. We all have to, I think, keep in mind, this is a long time before we see shovels breaking ground. We will hopefully, continue to move forward in information gathering. And maybe if we get to the step in which we are ready to build something, supply chain disruptions, interest rates will have normalized. It's hard to forecast that far in the future, but I mean, I think we're talking reasonably a couple of years probably before we see anything, materialize with this type of project. So, Gary, were you able to join us and answer the other question about the net zero? Is he with us?
He's still here, at least as an attendee.
Looks like he dropped out. He was logged in twice. I can try to promote him again.
It's not a showstopper for tonight, obviously. It's thinking at last thought I was on a
and while he's coming on,
Yes,
we
okay.
have incorporated into the cost many of the latest technologies in pool mechanical systems, water conservation. So a lot of this, it's not just the ice arena that is a very energy driven. And when you have both, there are great ways for synergies between ice and water. The ice rink generates a lot of heat that we can use to heat water. The pool, vice versa. So there's a lot of opportunities here to really approach net zero. Gary, you can take it from there.
Thank you, Stu. I was going to bring up the pool and ice combination. You can really make anything net zero, Scott. It's a question of the resources you want to put in to make that happen. And that will be in a developer-driven model, something that wants to be negotiated and discussed as far as town priorities are concerned. The pool is a little harder to do, given its energy draw, but as Stu noted, the ice arena actually helps. So having that full combination of programs makes a better opportunity to create a net zero building as a total complex.
Thanks. Just thinking way ahead, but thinking ahead.
We appreciate that. It's the only right way to build.
Yep.
Okay. Anita.
Thank you for, all of the materials and your presentation and stuff today. Obviously, as others have said, so much work has been put into this. And I know, Chris, you've really just charged ahead, and so much work has been pulled out of this feasibility study. And I think, gosh, you really got like our bang for our buck out of the design and all of the stuff here. It's a lot of information, and I hope my questions aren't already captured in your report. But I guess I have a couple of questions / concerns, and I can already hear people like groaning at me. But when I think about public and private partnerships, this wasn't like the idea of like town-owned property and then like a private developer. That wasn't like top of mind with me, to be honest. I was thinking, oh, is there an existing facility that we could add to? And I know you did review that, and you have that in the report of the different analyses and sort of like within the region. But even kind of other towns, like does Groton have land that we could use, or does Chelmsford have something where, you know, because land is such a hot commodity in Westford, everyone's looking for something, right? The dog park, there are all these other things that also have interest in terms of our like land use. And so I just have a question about that. And I do have like a little bit of a concern about moving forward right away with their request for interest, because just as so much amazing work that you've done with this feasibility study, I'm worried that the request for interest is going to move us farther, and we're not going to be able to kind of make sure that this is what the rest of the town wants, right? All of the abutters, making sure conservation's, you know, involved and everything like that. So I just worry that we're going to charge too far ahead without making sure we've kind of checked all the boxes with all the other stakeholders.
Sure, great comments. So as far as looking at other towns, that was something before your time with this board. The board had asked the Park and Rec Commission to investigate. We actually formed a working group with representatives from the town of Chelmsford to look into the opportunities there. One of the things that immediately came out from that working group was, how do you coordinate something like that? So who pays what, and you know, where does it live? And you know, if the towns were running it, who's going to contribute what personnel? It got very complicated very quickly. But we thought, okay, are there any models out there that we could leverage to maybe you know, use for our particular use case here? And what came to mind was the regional tech model. So where we have Neshoba Regional Tech, where we have you know, I think 7 communities contributing to that school. And we met with those folks. They actually have land on their property, and it's a great location, of course. So we went to a couple of their boards and talked with them. There was, you know, some interest, but they have at the time they had a lot of capital needs that they needed to deal with and were focused on, and just didn't have the bandwidth. So they politely declined to, you know, continue conversations going forward. So with that, we replied back to the board that we've, you know, done these investigations, ran into sort of these, you know, sticky bits, and, you know, we sort of moved forward with the feasibility study with the select board blessing. So as far as your second question about charging ahead, moving ahead too quickly. So keep in mind, we have talked with pretty much all the stakeholders that I think we would normally talk with. I think conservation, and in many cases, isn't really, I think, impacted by the site locations that we have, and we have not spoken with them. But if it does turn out that we need to, happy to do that. I think that we have to keep in mind that an RFI is in no way a commitment for doing anything else. It's simply more information. And the reason why I would suggest that we do move forward with this is that if there is nobody out there in the private development world at this time, given some of the comments that Scott made about interest rates and other aspects, who is interested in this project, then we're done. We sort of shelve it, and maybe we come back to it when economic conditions are better, or maybe we never come back to it. But I don't think that there's a lot of other information at this point that we can actually garner that we haven't already uncovered from my perspective. So if there are specific questions that we've missed, I'm happy to, try to delve into those, but I think we've kind of covered all the angles at this point. We understand that, there's privacy concerns, there's traffic concerns with abutters. That is going to be natural. We're going to have that challenge no matter where we locate this. And I think those types of questions are answered further down in the process, right? With more formal traffic studies. There's my cat's tail, sorry about that, and things of that nature. So hopefully that helps, address some of your questions, Anita.
Anita, go ahead.
I guess I would just, respond to that. And I appreciate, that there's a lot of work. And I know this has been going on since like beginning of 2000 to early 2000s, right? But like trying to talk about traffic after the fact, after you have a developer ready to go, that feels late. I feel like that stuff should be upfront and kind of in the beginning, right? Maybe if that's part of the request for interest or something, then I feel like that's information that we need to think about the abutters and like just like traffic flow for families, right? How that would look. And especially as, you know, we just have all these like issues with traffic right now or speeding. I just want to make sure that we're thinking everything kind of collectively and not later after we have somebody on board ready to go.
Yeah.
And I know there's so much energy in town behind this, and I'm not like shooting it down. I just want to make sure we're thoughtful about those abutters.
It's again, a great question. And it came up when we had the abutters informational meeting. I'm going to actually ask Gary to answer because I think he has a pretty good grasp on when and why a traffic study really can't be done at this point without, you know, going further down the process. So Gary, if you want to address that, please.
Well, we need to really understand what actually will be developed and how it will sit and how it will be used to better inform that traffic study. We visited the sites, we spoke with abutters, we got input from the community. We watched the site discharge at school discharge time over at Stony Brook and at Abbott for that matter. You know, we know what we know about the traffic. Route 40 seems to be, it has certainly a number of issues. Compared to other roads in town, as you noted, Anita, it's not alone in that. But without understanding what the full development will be, we could make some assumptions right now about a traffic study. But to get an actual traffic study and understand what improvements would need to be made to Route 40 to support this building, we'd need to have a better understanding of exactly what's going to happen there. I think having the developer's interest at least raises some input from them about how they would operate this facility. If it was a town developed facility, it would be a little different matter.
And let me add to that from things we learned on the Wellesley project. Wellesley got to this point and they issued their RFP to the developers right away. And there was really no response, just a lot of questions from the developers that then they took into account what the developers' input, the interest they were expressing, what were the key factors, what would make it work for a developer. And they had to go out with the RFP again 6 months later. So what we're thinking is that, as both Gary and Chris said, if we can begin to engage just the level of interest and what a developer would look for, it would really help us fine tune what we already know through the feasibility study. And that just what we learned from that interest would also help talking with the abutters, talking with the infrastructure we need, looking at more detailed traffic analysis. So again, it's kind of all part of the process. And unfortunately, in the way that the traditional feasibility study worked, we weren't really in a position to go out just informally to developers. But I think we don't want to get into the point where, as you said, Anita, we push too far ahead and have to take a step backwards like Wellesley did when they had to reissue the whole RFP a second time after they got initial input from the abutters, from the developers. So it's a good question and it's needs consideration.
It's kind of like the cart and the horse, which comes first.
Yeah.
Well, and without question, I'm sorry to interject it. It is recognized that the site needs a full traffic assessment, by all means,
no doubt about
it. Not just at that site, but the affected stretch of Route 40 beyond the extent of the site in terms of the study itself. That would certainly be part of this process.
That the feeder roads, you have Nutting Road and North Main Street. They're going to take all the traffic from other parts of town to get it to 40 as well.
Tom, you've patiently been waiting.
Not my typical mode, but gratitude for Chris and the team working on this. It's been a big project. I guess in terms of location recommendations, I agree with Scott that it's a lot easier for me, much easier for me to imagine this at Farmer Way than at Fisher. In terms of what's valuable or what the trade-offs are, is it helpful if we narrow the site, or give me sort of a plus minus, I guess, Chris, of us narrowing the guidance of location tonight versus continuing to explore? If it seems kind of very unlikely that Fisher's an option, then I can see it would be beneficial to narrow to either one or two.
I completely agree. I think going forward with an RFI where we have a little tighter requirements, particularly in the site location, will help get us better information if we get responses. So yes, I think that's a smart idea if we can come to that conclusion this evening.
And I have two short other ones.
Sure.
Chris, is there a way for us to get a picture of how other communities that have done this have ensured that the community's interests have first right of access, the The aquatic stuff is there. I think it would just help people, and anyone who's a little bit uncomfortable about having a private developer do this, to see what kind of guarantees we could have about rights of access and rights of control might be helpful. Is there a distilled version of what other communities have been able to require we could take a look at?
I believe we could pull that information from the agreement that the town of Wellesley has with the Edge group that's running the Boston Sports Institute. So yes, we have that as a model that we could review.
And Stuart, I guess you seem optimistic that you'll get a response. I guess just from the climate that's out there now, just, I don't know, a sentence or two on what you're seeing compared to, I guess I'm also interested in how many responses, real live responses Wellesley had at the end, and what's your outlook on the situation today and how it might be different?
Okay, several points there. Wellesley, when they did their RFP, they had 4 legitimate submissions. 2 were really very strong private developers. A third one was a kind of a partnership with the developer and the local YMCA to pull that together. And then the 4th one just was a pretty weak one altogether. So we did identify those challenges and knew that even then there were negotiations going on. The lease that was actually developed, which we've shared with the Park and Rec Commission, specifically built into the lease the priority times, locked in rental rates for the Wellesley school teams and priorities, as well as a lot of other community organizations that would have access to this. I think when I see what Westwood would be looking for, I think we would need to go quite a bit further. I think that a lot of that discussion, it will ultimately be a negotiation as you try to look at the lease costs, the property taxes, and what to really make it a win-win for both. I think the opportunity exists still, because I'm seeing demand. I'm seeing, our consulting business is identifying a lot of projects that people are still pushing forward with. There's still that demand is there. And if anything, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing how important those kind of community facilities are. So this is something that, I'm cautiously optimistic, but it takes some creative work in a public-private partnership. It may take, a public component of beefing up the infrastructure as it relates to handling the traffic. There's a lot of things to make this work and considerations that can help make this work. But I think we need that input from developers to know what they're looking for, understanding that anything they request is also part of their negotiation position. So, we all take that with a grain of salt sometimes.
Okay, we have questions and comments from our audience. John?
Yeah, what would a request for interest cost us? Who would do it? And what expense would that entail? And then I'm also concerned about the risk should you get into this in the middle and something go haywire and it fails, then what is the town's responsibility for something like that?
So John, good questions. I don't believe that an RFI is going to be that difficult or costly for us to do. I've talked with Jody about, potentially this opportunity happening, and just as a heads up, are there town staff available to assist on this effort? And she indicated that they could make it work. I'm also hoping that the working group that took part in the review of the RFP that we got for the consultants to work on the RFP also take some role in the development of the RFI. I know you were part of that process. So, I was hoping that a working group with a member from the school committee, I think we have Sean Kelly's already interested in joining, hopefully a select board member, a member of the permanent town building committee, Park and Rec Commission. So a multidisciplinary working group like we had last time to help develop and review any replies that we come back with, and then again come back to the various boards and committees with whatever we get back as and recommendations for next steps.
Okay.
Sorry, and just so your second question about what happens, I think what you're asking is if we somehow enter an agreement with the developer and they go belly up 10 years in, It is a good question. I don't have the answer to that. I would imagine that's probably going to be buried in the legalese in the agreement somewhere that we have to, as protect ourselves. I mean, we need as a town to be aware of that eventuality and build into the conditions that, we some sort of ability for the town to be protected if that happens.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to go to some of the questions and comments that we have from the audience. So first, Jeremy Gagney has his hand up. So Eric, if you could unmute him.
All right, am I live here?
You are, and we can hear you.
All righty. So I want to thank everybody that puts in all the hard work, the unpaid hours and stuff, looking at stuff for the town to better the town. So I appreciate that all. My first concern, I am a direct abutter to the proposed Fisher Way proposal. And I just wanted to talk, at least in my mind, as a couple, and I'll try to keep it quick because I know other people want to talk too. But
thank you. I appreciate that.
So key differences between, let's just say Westford and Wellesley. The Wellesley facility is located on a 4-lane Route 9. The entrance to get into that facility is a 3-lane road going in, is 2 lanes leaving, 1 lane entering the facility. It's a 130,000 square foot facility, described as massive by the developer. I can't leave my house on Main Street in Westford on a Friday to get to the top of the hill to the Frost School, which is 5 houses away, to pick up my children in under 25 minutes. Adding 800,000 visitors per year, and that is the info on the facility website for Wellesley, into the center of Westford is just mind-boggling to me. We cannot handle the traffic that we have now. We're going to propose a facility that directly abuts a historical property and in the historical overlay of the town center. And it also abuts like 15 properties that the town of Westford submitted to the National Registry of Historic Places back in March of 2003. And we're going to go ahead and it's going to be a minimum of a 2-story facility in the middle of a residential development, just because the town has interest in that land. And it seems like we have this land and we're going to try to squeeze something into it just to make it work. That's my first, concern. I think we're doing a little bit backwards. The noise is another facility. The Wellesley facility runs 6 a.m. to midnight, and it's constant, cars in and out. Refrigeration units I'm going to hear in the back of my house, which is my, sanctuary. And then you're just losing town controlled school property land. Say Abbott was built in 1955. So if you decide down the road in a decade that you need to rebuild Abbott School, well, guess what? You got a nice green field that you could potentially build at the same time that the school is still operating and not displace children. And then when the school's done, you demolish the old Abbott and you replace it with the fields. If you do that and you build a rec center, now you're back at square one looking for a facility to put a school at. And, we're just kind of chasing our tail here. So traffic, absolutely number one concern. Number two, it's totally out of place in a residential area. All of those type of developments or these facilities are in commercial areas. If you look everywhere around, Wellesley's on Route 9. The hockey rinks that are in Marlboro are at the intersection of 495 and 290 at the mall. The Chelmsford Westford Forum is down in the Brick Hill Industrial Park.
Okay, Jeremy, we do get your point. So if there's anything, and I've got lots of people waiting to talk. So if you have anything else in addition besides the traffic, and the noise, we understand that. Is there any other?
And the last big thing would be a legality for the town is now you're going to have to rezone property, school zone property, and you're setting a standard to commercialize it. Because if you're going to run it as a private public entity, you're going to have to rezone that property to be commercial. And you're starting a slippery slope with a lot of people in town that would like to rezone property that haven't been allowed to.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Next, Patricia Price, if we could unmute her, Eric. Marion Harmon came up. There's Patricia.
Oh, hi there. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, we can.
With regard to Jeremy's comments, I think many of them relate to the Farmers Way area as well. So amen, Jeremy. I agree with many, many things you said. And I did have a couple of questions in the Q&A.
I did see that. If you want to ask them now, since you're speaking with us, that would be terrific. And then we can take care of those.
Well, yes, thank you. I agree with him that it should be in a commercially zoned area or off a highway or somewhere with more access, because we're going to draw people from all around. I know we're trying to marry this to like this is for our kids and for the schools, but it really truly is like a commercial corporate enterprise where it will be money making and not exclusively for Westford. I don't think that we should narrow the choices of a developer if one did want to invest their money into something like this to, this is the site you have to, look at. I think that maybe suggestions for sites would be better. I mentioned in a Butters meeting last week that, what about enterprises that are already in Westford? Like, for example, Neshoba ski area, not inclusive of the ski area, but they also have like a huge property area for like snow tubing, Witches Woods. Maybe they might want a skating rink or an aquatic center. And why they're tied together or must be tied together isn't necessarily, true. I just feel like we're really limiting ourselves in our thinking. My property value is going to go down. Who's going to compensate me for that? I would never, ever, ever, ever would have bought this house if I thought there was going to be this huge thing on my property line. If you could see what I see, I'm sitting on my deck. It is the most beautiful, huge forest. All trees, beautiful birds, deers walk through every day on their way to the brook. It's sad, like the whole thing and the traffic. And as he said, everything like this anywhere else, like in Middleton, Marlborough, Wellesley, are all off highways with multiple lanes and much more access. It's just, I don't know. That's all I guess I can say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Now, Marion Harmon is next.
Thank you.
Hi, Marion. We can hear you.
Hi. Well, Scott, I thought brought up a very good point as he was talking about net zero buildings. And I know the selectmen have been extremely interested in and working with the climate group, several climate groups, and working on net zero buildings. The other part of net zero is that the sequestering of carbon can be done only by trees. And I live right across from the Farmer Way sites. And so I walk down there and in that woods. There's a nice trail system in that woods. And not all of it is equally valuable for sequestering carbon. Near the school, though, and I noticed that that the chart showed the playing fields being located very close to the school, at least one of them. Near the school are very large old oaks and old pines. And particularly the oaks are very, very valuable for sequestering carbon. So if something was built there, it would be so much better if it could be put closer to the houses. I know that that's probably not going to be a popular suggestion, but the trees from about 2/3 of the way across are much younger. That forest has not been growing nearly as long, maybe 50 years, but the trees on the third of the parcel that is closest to the school, the back of the school, are very old, hundreds of years old. And So those are sequestering a lot more carbon than the younger forests. So I was just going to suggest that whatever is built on that side, the forested side, if something is built there, that it be moved, its location away from the school as far as possible.
Okay, thank you. Linda D'Alessio has her hand up, so if we could unmute her. Linda?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and we're good.
Good. Anita, I appreciate what you said. I am Western Farmers Way, right here on Linwood Lane. I've lived here for 35 years. The proposal, which they seem to be eyeing, is directly in my side yard. Although I'm sympathizing with every abutter. We don't want this in or around our schools. We don't want this in and around our properties. And one thing that you people have, not you people, but they've neglected to say is that we have seen the accidents on Route 40 in and out. We have seen people die on Route 40. We've seen accidents at the start of Farmers Parcel going in there. We've seen med-flight helicopters land in the parking lot beneath my house to save lives. So if you're adding this much traffic to a proposed aquatic complex, it is not really the place for it. You're talking about you're going to draw in so many more people, and that's such a good thing. But when you look at the ramifications of drawing in so many more people down Route 40, it's an accident waiting to happen. And we've seen it. I've stood at the edge of my property, watched med-flight helicopters taking people out of here that have crashed head-on in Route 40. So I think you're right. This is stuff you're putting, the horse before the cart before the horse. It needs to be looked at and it needs to be considered. Another big concern I have, I don't like being a butter, trust me, I don't, is the fact that you have young children that walk to and from school. In my neighborhood alone, I think there's 9 young children who'll be going to the Stony Brook School and walking to school and walking home. I'm a little concerned about this huge complex right there. I'm sorry, I've lived here, I've seen things. So I can speak for all the butters. We don't want it. It doesn't belong here. It belongs in a commercial zone. So please, please, I implore you to hear us speak when we say this. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank
Okay, I'm Gayatri Kalambi.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I live on the west side, like on Linwood Lane, and we have been here like for 4 years, and we love the area. And my kids go to Stony Brook and Westford Academy, and it's nice conservation area, and like we see like deers, animals, and everything coming in, and also the kids like going to school, as Linda said. And I agree with others too. It should be built on a commercial property, not in a school zone. Like it's a safety issue for me. I'm very concerned, and I hope you'll look into this and make decision. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, Patricia, you have your hand up again. If you are going to be saying something that has not been said already or is different from what you have already said, then go ahead.
Thank you. The one thing I neglected to say that is this whole area is in a water protection area for the groundwater and everything else. And I think that if the Conservation Committee has not been consulted, which it was mentioned they have not, they absolutely should be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of comments in the Q&A that I will also just read and provide for folks. So Susan Thomas wrote, why limit analysis to town-owned land if exploring public-private partnerships? Is there precedent for 3 partners, town management company and owner, given consistent commercial vacancies on existing developed properties and parking lots in town? Chris, I don't know if you want to answer that now, if you want to consider that and, just say, you consider that and get back to Sue. I leave it up to you whether there's a response tonight or at some later point.
Is the question, should we consider other parcels? Is that the gist
Well,
of the
it
question?
seems why limit analysis to town-owned land if exploring public-private partnerships? So I think probably, yeah, what she's asking is there other parcels of land that are, privately owned?
Yep. Okay. Got it. So historically, these feasibility studies, when issued by a municipality, are for looking at if the municipality runs the facility. And so that's why we really looked at, the town, owned parcels. As we went through the research and, looked at different options out there, as we mentioned, there's this Wellesley opportunity as a working model. We, pivoted to something that we felt would be more achievable for the town to do. And what really would drive a developer to come to Westford to do a project like this is largely that public-private partnership. We're in a sense leasing them at a very low rate, or a parcel of land, so they don't have to go out and acquire that land. There may be other considerations, as you heard this evening, that the town might have to entertain in order to get a developer to work with us. That may not happen. So that's kind of why we focused on the parcels that we focused on, town-owned parcels. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't, in the RFI, express interest for a developer to do the project on another parcel in town. Perhaps because of some of the comments we're hearing tonight, a developer, maybe it's an existing business in the community, or maybe it's a developer who wants to purchase a property down on 110, for example. I don't know. But I think we could put in the language of the RFI that we would be interested in hearing alternative suggestions to the site that maybe we list in the RFI, and see what we come back with. My feeling is, if we don't ask, we're never going to know. So, again, I'll say it one more time. This isn't a commitment for the town to do anything. It's just simply more information gathering. So I fully support the idea of including that as a possible option for a developer to comment on.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have a couple of comments from, if I mispronounce your name, I apologize up front. Qianshu Shi, who writes, I see all top 3 site options have either reduced or limited parking spaces, which is not ideal for hockey rinks. Is there any way to incorporate the basement parking to help resolve this? I think that's probably a design question that'll be answered down the road as opposed to tonight. He also wrote, since the hockey team mainly is for Westford Academy, is there any other options that the site can be closer to Westford Academy to avoid transportation? Again, I'm going to assume that the committee has looked at all potential sites and did not find one closer to the academy. We have a comment from Bill O'Donnell, not really a question. We are abutters to the Fisher Way parcel. We are at 28 and 30 Depot Street and are totally in favor of the development of the center on Fisher Way, should that be a good choice for the project overall. We have a comment from Andrea Goulson. I'd like to contribute feedback from experiences in various communities which have recreational facilities in their towns and available to their populations. It creates a tremendous benefit for the young children all the way up to the seniors who have fitness and social opportunities provided. There is a virtuous cycle in how the community derives benefits from a facility like this, totally separate from any benefits that a developer may get from the management. I feel that the comments from the passionate abutters reflect their views, but those from a small group ignore the massive benefits that would be shared by all the rest of the community. Jeremy Gagney writes, Wellesley purchased a church that was vacant for 8 years for $3.8 million to put the facility on. Alyssa Nakashi in Holzberg writes, is there any guidance on spending priorities regarding how we will fund the library center building and this project? And then lastly, from Andrea Goulson again, there are thousands of children, high school students, young adults, parents, and older individuals who today don't have easy access to places to learn to skate, exercise, or learn to swim. And Lisa Groves writes, as a direct abutter at 84 Main Street, I share the same concerns about traffic noise, et cetera, expressed by other abutters. I am opposed to this proposal at Fisher Way. There is one last comment from Jamie Holmes, and then I am going to turn it back to the select board for discussion as to where we go from here. So Jamie, Eric, if you could unmute her. Jamie?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. My name is Jamie Holmes. I live at 20 Moore Road. I think that a recreation center in the town of Westford is something that is very necessary and has been for a long time as our population grows. And we do, as other people mentioned, have, a mix from young ages to elderly to be able to have programs at a recreation center that could support all of those people. I can understand some of the concerns with the locations, and I think that there could be more work done on that end, and can appreciate any traffic studies or conservation meetings that need to be had and all of that. But I do think that this is a valiant effort that has been put forth for many years at this point. And many of the people working on it, their fruits of their labor won't even be seen by their own children by the end of all of this. But having 5 children myself, people mentioned the Stony Brook site. On any given night, there are people in and out of Stony Brook, not just between school, the amount of traffic that is between school that wouldn't most likely affect the recreation center hours. I don't see any additional traffic being added to what they see on a drop off or pickup to the school. And like I said, I don't see a lot of programs being offered at 7 a.m. or 2 p.m. that would affect that. And also the fact that there is, sometimes 4 of my kids have an event, I guess, at Stony Brook at the same time on the same night. So I don't see, I understand where people may think there's going to be a large amount of traffic at certain points, and maybe there will be, but I don't think on a consistent basis that the traffic patterns will increase as much as people are maybe thinking by this. And like I said, I do appreciate that all of that stuff needs to be looked at, but I do think that this, that it just shouldn't be a hard no on, we don't need a rec center. That's not important at this point. We have a state championship.
Okay, Jamie, I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Sure. So we have a state championship swim team that doesn't have a pool to practice in all at the same time. They aren't able to host swim meets. That's really a disappointing thing. We have hockey teams that are paying out of their parents are paying crazy money out of their pocket. This would benefit so many people in so many ways in our town. And I hope that we can work through whatever issues there are to get to the end goal here.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, there are a couple more comments in the Q&A, and these are the last 2 I'm reading, and then I'm turning it back to the select board. Christy Bates writes, moving forward with the RFI is the prudent next step so that we can gather additional information to review our options. A community center would be a huge asset to Westford. Bravo to Chris Barrett for his persistence. And Lisa Ratte, I am in support of the rec center for the town. The benefits to various age groups outweigh the negatives. I don't even have school-age children since graduated, but I still see this as a benefit. Okay, with that, let me turn it back to the select board and find out if there is preference. How do we want to proceed from here? Do we want to do we want to issue an, go forward with an RFI? Do we want to narrow the location choices? I will say, because I haven't weighed in yet, that I do agree with the folks with respect to Fishaway. I don't think that, I don't think that's an appropriate place, having drawing on my experience from 13 years on the planning board. You've got Fishaway, a narrow roadway, one way in, one way out. The impact on the traffic impact on the houses and the residents there would just be phenomenal. I do not see how our roadways could possibly entertain the traffic that would come with this center. So I actually do agree with the comments, and also with my fellow board members who have indicated that this is not a viable place for the center. With that, Tom has his hand up, and don't forget to unmute yourself, Tom.
Andrea knows me too well and knows that I do that. So just really strong discussion here, and I definitely want to give respect both to the athletes and the families of athletes and the people who want to learn to swim, and the value for the community, and the fact that there's work to do here to figure out how to do this in a safe way. And I think that's part of the work that the town will do, to look at how do we make sure that we're doing this in a safe way. With that in mind, I'm in favor of moving forward with the RFI. And given that this committee gives us some guidance that there's a benefit to narrowing the options, I think the Fisher approach would have too many problems, and I think it would benefit us to focus on the Farmer Way options.
Okay. John?
Yeah, of the choices we have, I think Farmer's Way is the best choice. If we go forward with this RFI, I think we need to take a look at a couple of options. One that Susan Thomas brought up, maybe trying to locate this along 110 or in some kind of a commercial district versus, I think 40 is the best of the options, but that has a traffic issue itself. So maybe open up our options a little bit. Maybe we're trying to make this thing a little bit too big, but as we move along, you can get more information, considering either adjusting the scope or adjusting the site, and maybe we can find something even better than Farmer's Way.
Okay, Scott.
Yeah, I look over 40 and think we add a stoplight at Oak Hill Road because of accidents there. We add another one at Dunstable Road because of accidents there. And we keep on saying, well, that's the last light. And we're going to go and say, well, let's put 800,000 cars on that road a year. And we're going to put stoplights at Nutting and probably the facility itself and maybe North Main. And I just seems like we're going to take Route 40 and turn to Route 110 with this thing. So, I come to agree with the abutters that this is not, it's the best of the spots. It's not a good spot. So at the risk of making RFI perhaps more complicated, I would suggest that, as Susan Thomas did, that looking at some of the other commercial parcels, basically means 110. There's very little you can do on Route 40 down at the Route 3 side. So mostly Route 110 is, I guess, the options to look at. But there are properties there that right now, you could have. And but they get questions at what price, and does that make the whole project blow up? But I think we out of fairness to our residents, we look at that, because Route 1, and even for the developer, if we're going to make the developer take on a cost, or the town takes on a cost of improving infrastructure, Route 110 has already got design plans in place to widen, so it's a lot cheaper to put it there in terms of infrastructure in the long run.
So I think what I'm sort of hearing from the board members is two things. One, there's a sense to go forward with an RFI to gain and gather more information. And from my perspective, that's what I see the RFI as being, is an opportunity to gather more information from a developer out there, to see what the interest is, to see how things work. and to bring that information back and add it to all of the other information that you've gathered throughout the 17, 18 years that we've been working on this, so that we continue to have everything possible, all the information possible to make to make a decision and as an informed decision as possible. But I also hear what the board is saying, which is that we don't want to confine our the potential parcels to only these only the Farmer Way parcels, and that if there are other opportunities out there, if there are, and particularly looking along Route 110 in the commercial district, that we or that you folks should continue to look into that option and into those options as well, to see if there is something that can be done there. So I'm sort of hearing two courses for the Rec Commission and for you folks to follow up on and to pursue. With that, Scott, and then Anita, do you want to, after Scott, do you want to add something? Anyway, let me get to Scott and you can think about that, Anita, okay? I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yes, but when you go for that RFI, I think, again, I would encourage adding in that net zero, because it is a town standard. It may add to cost and therefore affect feasibility. So, yeah, I'm not being a clean energy warrior here. I'm actually thinking about the long-term planning for the town and for a formula that works. So I would just make that part of the RFI, because it wasn't really part of the RFP. It was that concern kind of came after we got down the road of the RFP.
Anita?
I guess I have two thoughts. One is that for everyone listening, and we don't always have all these many people on our calls, we're trying to get to yes, but we want to do it in a really, like inclusive, thoughtful way, right? So we're trying to figure that out. And I think exploring the 110 corridor or something is a great idea, but how that kind of plays in with the RFI release, like, I'm not sure, does it make sense to look at that first or not? Do them both at the same time? I don't have a clear thought on that.
Okay, I don't either. And maybe that's something for Chris and these guys to think about and process after tonight's meeting, as opposed to, answering that right now. I mean, it may be something they just need to think about. Jody?
Yes, often we do bring not necessarily RFI, but an RFP on an important project like this to the select board before we release it, just to make sure that you feel we're covering everything. So my office is going to help with this, but I do want us to come back to the select board and show them it before we release it, just in case we've missed any of their points. So I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, I just assumed it was going to come back to us, Jody. So I guess I'm thinking about how we want to proceed from here. And so I guess let me, even though I said I wouldn't, let me ask you, Chris, or Stu, or Gary, do you perceive this moving forward on two fronts simultaneously, or do you want to take the opportunity to look more closely into what may or may not be available on Route 110 if there are private owners out there who you might want to contact, who might be interested in participating in this? How do you think the best way to proceed would be?
I think that we should include both the option of looking at Farmer Way as well as the commercial districts in our community as part of the RFI, and see what kind of information we get back as a result of that request. It may be likely that the developer is going to do some analysis on their own and look at all the parcel versus what are other alternatives on the 110 corridor, and be able to, quickly ascertain from their perspective which one makes sense to them and let us know. So I think, again, it's probably pretty easy for us to incorporate that in the RFI and see what kind of responses we get.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion from the board, or is there direct? Yeah, let's do it by motion to give this the Parks and Recreation direction. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
So I would make the motion that the select board supports this committee in pursuing an RFI that will include both the Farmer Way parcels and other commercially available options on the 110 corridor.
Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. I don't think we have any further discussion. So let us, all those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Just before we go, I do want to say I recognize that we got further comments after I said I wasn't going to be reading any of them. And I'm not going to, but they will be included as part of the record of this meeting. And they will be forwarded to all the select board members so that they can also see the comments that came in afterwards. I also recognize that a couple of people raised their hands after I said I was not also taking any more comments. And if you want to submit comments, written comments to us, then please feel free to do so. You can send them to the attention of the town manager's office and to Chris Barrett as chair of the vice chair of the Park and Recreation Commission, and they also will be forwarded to the select board. And finally, I want to say, as Anita stated, we really are listening and hearing everyone and all of the concerns and the competing concerns. We are trying to get to yes. We are trying to get to a project that everybody can sign on to and feel comfortable about. This is the beginning of a discussion. It's not the end of a discussion. And, it will be back before the Board of Selectmen at some point, and all of you will, get notice or hear about it. But again, I also want to thank all 72, although at one point I believe there were 78 attendees who listened in tonight. Your interest is valued and your input is valued, and we thank you very much. So with that, we're going to move on to our 8:05 p.m. item, which is old and new business.
Thank you all.
Chris and everybody, thank you all. Thank you for attending. I'm sure we'll see you again.
Very good. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay. We are at our 8:05 p.m. item, which is old and new business. So first item is a request from the Monuments and Memorials Committee to approve the draft policy and application to propose donating a monument memorial on town property. And Paul Murray, who is the vice chair of the committee, is with us. So if we could unmute Paul. Hello, Paul. Paul, you there?
I think I just pushed the the right button.
You did. We can hear you. Okay.
Madam Chairman, before I launch into the agenda item, I've been trying for the last 10, 15 minutes to get your attention on the previous item. And with your permission, I would like to issue a short comment.
You know what, Paul, I really can't, because that would mean that the other folks who had their hands up who I didn't recognize would feel left out. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I just don't feel that it's fair to the other folks. But as I said, please send us your comments so that we can consider them and make them part of the record.
Okay, or can I add it on the end of this agenda item because it is related to this agenda?
Well, why don't you go ahead and we'll see, okay? How you will.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for putting this on the agenda. We are here in response to your charge of March 8th to the Monuments and Memorial Committee to generate process and procedural documents to support the effort of evaluation and approval of monuments and memorials on town property. The committee, made up of Terry Stater, Chair, Nancy Cook, Secretary, and members Marilyn Day, Linda Green, Dave Christiana, and Steve Rogers have labored away to get to where we are now, and the board should have received copies of draft copies of those documents.
And we did.
Okay, the committee reviewed the procedures and policies from a number of different cities and towns. After studying these documents, thoughts and ideas were discussed, and the policies and procedure document was generated in what we think best fits the town of Westford. So when the draft was accepted by the committee, forwarded to the board for your comments, edifications, and approval. With these documents in place, the committee will be able to evaluate monument and memorial requests for review. Committee acceptance will be submitted to the board for final acceptance and implementation. The process is clearly defined in section 3 of the first document of policy, so I'm not going to repeat it. It's the same comments I had written there. At this point, if there are changes to the documents, please forward the information to our committee secretary, Nancy Cook. The documents will be edited into a final version and returned to the board for your approval.
Okay. So do we have comments or questions from the board about the documents, both the application process as well as the recommendation form? Tom?
Paul and the committee, I thought it was a really thoughtful and excellent job and covered a lot of ground and a lot of careful thought about procedural issues. I was wondering if there might be a fit somewhere in the language as sort of a statement of principle or intent that it is the hope that we're recognizing the totality of Westford and all the different groups that have made Westford so vital and so important as a consideration item. And sort of specifically, I just want to make sure that there's a strong message that for those who might be contemplating putting forward a monument, that we're eager to get all the voices of Westford pulled forward. I'll bet that's the committee's intent already, but I just think it might be a useful add to the language itself, that it is that might be the desire of the town to see the totality of the town represented in the monuments.
So noted.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I heard you, Paul. Okay. Anita?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for pulling this together. I know it's always hard to kind of create the first draft. It's always easy to react to something as opposed to developing something from scratch. And I have a couple of questions. One is the idea or thought that someone would submit a proposal, meaning like a design for a monument, or for example, with the creation of this monument committee, I feel like something was already created and then it was being offered to the town. But for this process, is it really clear that which one it would be, if something's already created, or if it would be a proposal first before work is done?
We understand we'll have proposals for new monuments, new designs, and we'll take it from there. That's what the procedural thing, the procedural and application will iron out. as to whether they're applicable to what the requester has in mind.
Okay. And I guess my other question, or I could see opportunities for a little bit, maybe more specifics or clarity around what you're looking for, not just this sort of like open text line, but you'd like to see a design with those measurements, right? That kind of align with those different like lighting, site preparation, stuff like that, or just, I feel like, see, I'm envisioning like a visual. This is what we want. This is what we're proposing. This is the location, the height measurements, and all that stuff. And so I don't know if that's what you were also envisioning, but I was trying to figure out how that fits into this packet. But my other thought is related to Tom's, and that there are a couple of word smithing I would consider suggesting. And that is, you know, there is something about like people would be favored who have long-standing ties to Westford. I think, you know, if we're thinking about like donors or monuments or something, it could also be just like that historical impact, regardless of whether or not there's a long-standing tie. Just to kind of with Tom's piece about like making sure we're really inclusive. And I wonder if even like it's a group of people, not just like individuals. So if we wanted to dedicate something to like the women of Westford, or, you know, the people who've made history, or like Indigenous peoples, maybe considering something more like a collective group. I don't know.
I mean, no, actually, Anita, to your last point, that makes sense, because if you look at the monuments that are on the town common, they are, you know, to veterans who have participated in the various wars that our country has fought. So I think your point is well taken. You know, it's not simple. You know, is there a group besides, you know, veterans, you know, that we might, or somebody might want to, you know, erect and dedicate a monument to? So I do think that your point is well taken.
We had that experience before the Monuments Committee got formed, back when I was your veteran service officer. I was approached by a veteran who wanted to put a monument on a street corner for his buddy that was killed in Vietnam. And Jeff Hall, Paul McMillan, and myself sat down and discussed it. And when we went through it, we found out the only monuments that they were proposing were the only style was World War I. So we went through, and part of the access to the veterans computer that I had, we went through and found every KIA for World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf Wars. Searched that to make sure that they were valid. And we formed a fundraiser, had the signs built. They were dedicated at Memorial Day, and that was a group effort. So if that answers your question, Anita, on a group effort. All of this will come before the committee as I view it. And each individual case will be screened and looked at. And the bottom line is it's going to come to the board for final approval.
Right.
During that course of that action, I'm sure that we will be shooting you draft copies of that, so you'll be aware of what's going on. The committee will put the applications together. They will vote whether they approve it or not. And all that information will be submitted to the board for the final approval as outlined in the charge.
Okay. Anita, you have another comment or question?
Yeah, sorry. I have a couple of just additions for the group to review. At the on the very last page, we have like Director of Public Works, Land Use Superintendent. I was thinking we could also consider adding the Historic Commission and the Cultural Council, since they're both, they might have opinions on this as well.
I think you're referring to that checklist in document number 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So noted.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I just had a question. Paul, I think you were interested in our forming or forwarding to you comments or any suggested rephrasing or something, if we had that. Is that okay with you guys? That'd be appropriate? Instead of
Yes.
discussing them all here?
Well,
Okay, you're breaking up, John. Can you,
Well, I'm just concerned, I've got a few comments that I just want to go over, point by point here, just forward them, and then you come back with a revised version.
okay, that makes sense, John. I think, Paul, what John said is that he's got a couple of comments and revisions that he's going to, pardon, John?
Suggestions.
Suggestions that he's going to forward to you for the committee's consideration. And that, based on that, and as well as the comments you've heard from Tom and Anita tonight, and perhaps Scott, who has his hand up, for you folks to work into a revised charge, a revised documents, I'm sorry, not charge, a revised application and procedure to bring back to us. Scott?
Yes, I first, again, thanks to everyone who took direction from us that was overly vague to come up with something that is actually relatively concrete. So I appreciate taking form and creating substance, I guess. To Tom and Anita's point, I think we perhaps need to do an educational, job ourselves, because monuments tend to come up because somebody or some group asked for them, and that has traditionally been veterans groups because of the nature of our history. But we have one of the firefighters. We've got one for Raj Palluri, who was killed in a skiing accident. We have built monuments for non-veterans when we've been asked to. So I think the message is to other groups, whether that be indigenous peoples or whoever it might be, that what representation of monuments certainly take those ideas to the monuments committee or to the select board, and we do have a process to go through to make sure those dreams become reality.
Okay. Okay, all of you just froze on my screen. So I think probably the next steps is that for folks who have comments, to get them to the group, to the Monuments and Memorials Committee. They can incorporate our comments and then bring back a revised application and procedures to us for us to consider at a subsequent meeting whenever they're ready to do so. And I don't know if it's just me, but I just lost Paul on my screen. Is that just me? Oh, he's back. Never mind.
okay, I was commenting that what you just had to say, Madam Chairman, is the exact procedure that we are going to follow.
Great.
All right. If comments are not clear, we'll make phone calls to the person who commented and get it resolved.
Great, we appreciate it. And thank you for your work. And we look forward to hearing back from you and seeing revised documents. As I said, just contact the town manager's office when you're ready to come back to us, okay?
Can I have one comment on memorials?
On memorials, yes.
Okay, with the presentation on the previous
memorials, Paul.
This is where I'm going. They keep referring to that parcel as Farmers Way. I'd like to remind them it's Veterans Memorial Complex.
You are absolutely right.
And I would like to see that changed if you so desire.
You know what? You're absolutely right. And I will relay that to the vice chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and let's not forget our veterans.
We won't. Absolutely not. Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work. Okay, next, we have a request to approve Monday, October 17th, 2022 is the date for special town meeting and to review the town meeting calendar. Jody?
Yes, so we did, excuse me, we did check with the appropriate people and the moderator, and everyone seems to be okay with October 17th. And there is an election shortly thereafter, so the town clerk would greatly appreciate having a little bit of time to put that together after town meeting. So we do have a draft calendar in your packet. I'm not sure it's absolutely positively complete, but it gives you some idea. And if you do vote to support October 17th, then we will be asking you to open the warrant on July 26th.
Okay, any comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Scott?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next, we have a request from the Scholarship and Grant Committee to reduce membership from 7 members to 5 members, including a school superintendent representative. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, Scott?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. We have a request to approve the 2022 annual reappointments for committee and board members as listed in the meeting packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
And all those in favor, John?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Our next item is a request to reconsider the select board vote of June 14th, 2022, appointing Board of Registrar in accordance with General Law, Chapter 51, Section 15. So before we start this discussion, I think just a couple of things. First off, the board, what happened on June 14th was the result of an error, both out of the clerk's office and the select board. I really want to make it clear to everybody involved that this was simply a mistake. There was nothing nefarious about it. There was nothing intentional about it. It really was simply oops, we goofed. And so I do want everybody to understand that. Since then, we have been in touch with town council about about how to correct this mistake and what the authority of the select board is or is not with respect to appointment of registrars. And I do believe that opinion has been circulated to, I know, to the select board, I believe, to the folks and to the folks involved. In essence, what town council has advised us is that what happens is that each of the town parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, submits to the select board a list of candidates whom they have requested be considered for appointment to the Board of Registrars. The select board is confined to picking individuals from those lists. we are not authorized to go outside of those lists. And so the names must appear on those lists. As I said, due to a mistake and the fact that the select board thought we could do this, a person was appointed at our June 14th meeting who did not appear on that list. And that was subsequently brought to our attention. So tonight, I think all we are doing is reconsidering that vote tonight. And then after the board decides whether or not to reconsider that vote and what it wants to do, we can then talk about next steps and what we do next. So that's a brief sort of explanation of where we are, how we got here, and what's at least right now before the select board. I don't know if anybody on the board has any questions or comments. I don't see any. I don't see any questions or comments from anybody in the audience.
Scott's hands up.
I see Scott has his hand up now.
I guess it's just a question. So do we need a motion to reconsider, or we're going to wait? We're not going to reconsider tonight. We'll do it at our next meeting. I guess, there is, the agenda says, discuss reconsideration. Do you need a motion to reconsider to have any discussion, or can we just discuss without that motion?
I think we can discuss. I think we can discuss it. I think we need a motion to reconsider the appointment itself before we can reconsider the appointment, Scott, okay?
Well, I see no choice given town council's opinion but to reconsider. So the question is, do you want that motion now, or is it for a future?
I think my thought is that we do that motion tonight to reconsider. We let all of the interested parties know that the select board will be, will reconsider, if that is the vote. I don't want to presume that that's the vote, but if that is the vote, that we are reconsidering our appointment, that we let all of the parties know that we will be reconsidering the appointment, that they submit their lists of whom they would like to be considered to be appointed, and that we do that at our next meeting. And that we do the appointment itself at our next meeting, because the agenda does not say that we will be appointing somebody. It just says we are reconsidering our vote. And I really want to make sure that everybody is aware, and particularly the public is aware of when we do the reappointment. And I'm not sure that as chair, I don't believe that the agenda item is listed, gave fair notice to everybody that we would actually do the reappointment tonight. So that's my thought process. Tom?
Given the town council's interpretation of the law is that at least my understanding is we have effectively no choice. I can make the motion to reconsider, and then I guess following that would be discussion of the appropriate interval of time and making sure that we get the right lists in the right form. Okay. So I would make the motion to reconsider.
Okay, before you do that, there is a comment from the audience now. So Kathy Lynch has her hand up. So if you could unmute her.
Good evening. We did submit our list in the proper time, and I believe that window is closed for handing in your signatures, or not signatures, your nominees for the position. So I don't think there's anything more to do to postpone the vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Jody?
Yes, in discussion with council today, depending on what the board decides to do, if, according to council, if the board is not happy with the list, you can send it back to the Republican Town Committee, asking them to submit another list.
Okay, John?
Don't we also have another nomination from the Democratic Committee?
I believe we do, don't we, Jody?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do we have the makeup of the board as it exists today?
Patty, can I ask you if you can respond to that question?
Yes, the board is currently made up of 4 people. I am on it as the town clerk and I'm unenrolled in a party. We have Elisa Nakazian-Holzberg, who is a Republican. Currently, Dina Donahue is a Republican. And the other member is John Ricketson, who is a Democrat. So this particular seat is held by a Republican currently, and it can be either a Republican or a Democrat chosen to fill the seat at this point.
Go ahead, John.
One more question. What are the expirations of the appointments for the existing board? I know Dina's ran out or was supposed to be at the end of June, right?
That is correct. It's one every year. An appointment expires except me until I'm gone.
So then we are going to appoint one replacement on that board that exists today. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Okay.
I may have a comment too. May I, Madam Chair?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry.
I've looked at other towns and the board of registrars are usually listed in the town organization. And they also have a big list of what their responsibilities are and things like that. And that doesn't appear to be the case here in Westford. We don't have something listed in the town organization as a board of registrar. So that might be something to think about in the future.
Okay. Scott?
I was gonna say, you've got a motion from Tom. I was gonna give a second to Tom's motion.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We also now have, I thought, John Ricketson, did you raise your hand and then put it down? I'm trying to find out if.
Yes, this is John and Kathy Ricketson.
Okay.
So what, can you clarify this motion? So I'm Kathy Ricketson from the Democratic Town Committee. John's my husband. And we submitted our nominee by the deadline. And so what is the motion now?
Okay, so the motion right now is to reconsider our vote that we took on June 14th that appointed Dina Donahue as the registrar. Because in essence, according to town council, we could not do that lawfully, okay? So we need to reconsider that vote because town council's advised us that it is an unlawful vote. And then we were going to talk about the process of going forward in terms of appointment of a registrar for the position of Dina Donahue's that's up or that's expiring July 1st. Okay.
Okay, because I wanted to, reiterate what Kathy Lynch had said. They had submitted their candidates. We had submitted our candidates by the time, the proper time that was required. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I do understand that both parties did get their lists in on time. My concern for tonight is that our agenda doesn't list that we're actually going to do the appointment tonight. And in speaking with town council earlier, we believe that the safest thing to do is to reconsider and then schedule for our next meeting or whenever we decide to do it, the appointment of the registrar so that it is on the agenda listed as that and that everybody has fair notice in accordance with the open meeting law. So that's where, you know, in talking with town council, that's where we came out. Scott?
I mean, did the town council suggest that we have to work from the lists that we have, or is an option for the committees to change that list for the meeting?
Jody, correct me if well, I'll let Jody answer it then.
Yes, town council did tell us today if the board is not satisfied with the list for some reason, and I'm not saying you are, but if the board wasn't, you could send it back to the committee and ask for a different list.
I guess I don't understand why that would be.
I'm not, as Jody said, I'm not saying that we're going to do that. Town council just said that we had the option to do it, okay?
Andrea?
Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, so I think we were just trying to get clarification on what action the board needed to take tonight and future action. And the other question that I had was, would there be a vacancy if the board votes to reconsider tonight? And council said no, that the current appointee, even though she's set to expire June 30th, would continue until the board took the vote. So that was the information. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question from Christy Bates, and she writes, can undeclared voters be considered for this appointment? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Patty does.
I actually do. I asked I asked this question of town council, and yes, but you would have not gotten anybody from a nomination, for want of a better word, to be considered from either of the two town committees. And this has happened in our past. I mean, not that we've taken someone unenrolled, but typically we don't have all this excitement generated over the Board of Registrars. So yes, only if no one was presented for your consideration, then you might choose someone of your own choosing.
Okay. And finally, there's a comment from Chris Turner that has to do with the Republican Town Committee and the votes that it took. I am making a decision. I am not going to read that comment. What happened within the Republican Town Committee is for the Republican Town Committee to figure out itself and to determine itself what it wants to do. It does not impact the decision that the board is making tonight in terms of a motion for reconsideration. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Scott?
Yes, so just to be clear, but if the Republican Town Committee were to reconsider that list, they have how long to do it? Before, I mean, is there some, if we make a decision in 2 weeks, is that list due tomorrow or the day before that? What is that rule? Does anyone know?
Patty, does the list have to be submitted anytime before, within a specific time period before our meeting, or is it simply in time to get in our packets for our meeting?
Well, I actually am not sure about that. I do have the two lists. They came before the June deadline that I had given them. Both committees responded, so it's something I would have to double check.
Just observing that, again, that's, I don't want to this is independent of our decision tonight, but if the Public and Town Committee felt there was a need to change that internal process and change names, that what would the time frame be for them to do that? That's all I'm asking on their behalf.
Okay, so I think that's a question we can ask town council and get an answer for. Tom?
It's okay. If we're ready to move and take this vote, then we can
Well,
discuss after.
okay, I think both Kathy Lynch and Kathy Ricketson both have something to say because they have their hands up. So I will hear from the two of them and then we will take the vote. Kathy, you're both Kathy, so yeah, Kathy Lynch, go ahead and then I'll hear from Kathy Ricketson.
Hi, thank you. So the Republican Town Committee had their election and came up with 3 very qualified names. So I don't know why, and I'm not saying you are, but I wouldn't know why this select board would reject them. These are our 3 names. And if you were ever to do that, I guess I would really want to know why. Number 2, these are due. Let's see, you were asking about deadlines, and I believe it's July 15th that this needs to be selected, or no later than August 15th. So the Democratic Party and the Republican Party did submit their names on time, and you have till July 15th and no later than August 15th to make the decision.
Thank you. And I do want to reiterate, we have not said that we're rejecting the candidates on your list. All right, Kathy Ricketson? Or John, whichever one is speaking.
So I concur with Kathy Lynch, and I would appreciate the names of the candidates who have volunteered for both committees to be acknowledged, people who have stepped forward. And I concur that the lists were submitted properly and on time, and a change in the list doesn't seem to be what either committee wants at this point.
And that's fine, okay? We're not saying that you have to, okay? That's absolutely fine, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna vote on the motion that's on the floor for the motion for reconsideration. We're gonna put on our July 12th meeting, which is before July 15th, Kathy, an agenda item for the appointment of a registrar, okay? If you folks are standing by your lists, both of you, that's fine. I would just ask that you let the town clerk's office know that, so that these lists can be provided to us in time for our meeting. If they're changing in any way, which it doesn't sound like they will be, then let her know that as well. Okay, with that, we have a motion and a second on the floor. So all those in favor of reconsidering our vote of June 14th, 2022. Tom?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Anita?
No.
Okay. And John?
Aye.
I'm aye. Okay, so with that, I'm being corrected that our meeting was actually June 10th. I'm not even sure. I'm so screwed up.
June 14th.
June 14th, yeah. Our prior meeting was June 14th. Okay, so with that, we voted 4-1 to reconsider, and we're going to put the appointment on for July 12th. Tom, final word?
I hope so. So for clarification, there's no requirement for the town committees to update their lists in any way, but they have the opportunity to do that until the packets are put together, which is typically a week from this coming Friday.
I would say
that
that
opportunity exists for them, but there's no requirement to do it.
I would say that's correct, but Jody's going to say something.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. The statement from council was the lists were submitted. The only way to change that list, my understanding was if the board rejected the list. So Kathy had given deadlines and said they'd pass, but council told me that you could, if you chose to, reject the list and then they would give you a new one. So if you're not rejecting the list, then I'm not would replace it. I could check with council on that, but that's not what he said.
Okay. Let me ask, I mean, boy. You got to say, when we make a mistake, it's not an easy, you know, it leads to, it becomes very complicated. Okay, so the only way and I agree, that is what town council said, is the only way that we get new lists is if we reject the lists that were being submitted to us. I haven't heard any select board member tonight say that they are rejecting the lists that both parties submitted on time. If people, is that correct? I mean, people could just nod their heads, yes, no, whatever. Okay. So if we're not rejecting the lists, then the lists that were submitted are the list that we will work off of on July 12th. So I think we have a plan of action going forward. All right. And I assume that if anybody has any issues, we'll hear about it and we'll hear from you and we'll deal with them on the 12th, if not before. So with that, we will get your lists, the lists that have already been presented. I see you, John. Just let me finish, please. With that, we will have your lists that were submitted. They'll be in our packets for July 12th. Okay, John.
Well, we voted to reconsider. We voted to reconsider. Don't we have to then take a vote that said that the vote we took on the 14th is void or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
All right.
All right. So with that, let me just make sure. Hang on a minute. All right. Kathy Lynch is asking a question, which is why the delay. As I explained, the delay is because tonight does not list that we would be appointing a registrar. It wasn't on the agenda. It doesn't comply because I and in discussion with council determined that it didn't give proper notice. We weren't going to make the appointment tonight, and we'll make the appointment on July 12th. Okay, and with that, we're going to move on. All right. Our final item under old and new business is one that is an announcement that is bittersweet for the board to make. Our town manager of 14 years has given notice of her retirement effective January 3rd, 2023. We could begin and go on from now until January 2023 and talk about all of the accomplishments of Jody over the last 14 years and all of the changes she has brought to the town and everything, how far advanced the town has come in the last 14 years, but we won't do that tonight. What we do need to talk about tonight, though, is establishing a process to begin the search for a new town manager, as well as establishing a search committee and seeking volunteers for that search committee, and also we need to talk about how we go about issuing a request for proposals for an executive search firm because I have taken the liberty of determining that we're going to want a search firm to help us with this process. And it's not something that we can do without, help from a professional search firm. So I think, first on the agenda, is to consider the process and to consider issuing, how we're going about issuing a request for proposals for an executive search firm. I do know, I do believe that Jody has gathered a couple of samples of requests for proposals from other towns who went out for searching for a town manager. So I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel for an RFP, but certainly we need to tailor any request for a proposal to obviously the town and to our needs and our requirements and our criteria. So I open to suggestions about how we do this. My initial thought process was perhaps a couple of us, so that obviously we don't have quorum, but a couple of us perhaps could start looking at some of the samples we have and perhaps put together a draft of an RFP that we can then bring to the full board and circulate to the full board for the full board to comment on and look at and then finalize to put it out. So, but I'm certainly open to comments and suggestions from the rest of you. Scott.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the questions I have is, yes, I agree with your idea. I'm happy to work with you, but if another member wants to, that's to be discussed. But I'm also curious. This was not in our budget, so I guess how do we pay to recruit? How
do we pay for it?
Yeah.
I guess. Jody, and help me out here. We're going to have to go to FinCom for a request for reserve funding.
So you could either go to FinCom or you could use ARPA funds. Either one of those would be options, but you're right. There's not funding in the budget for this.
Then you can't go.
That's the ticket, John. Sorry, no funding, Jody. You can't go.
For the budget next year, Jody.
Right, we'll put it in next year's budget. So, a year from now, okay? Yeah. So, so I think that's what we have to do is we'll need to either go to the reserve fund or ARPA to get funding to hire a search firm. Other suggestions or comments? I'm not seeing any. Scott, you volunteered. I'm happy to work with you and start working on it and then bring it back to everybody for everybody's consideration and input. And then we can go from there.
I'll help if you need a third. But
great, thank you, appreciate it. I suspect all of you at some point will chime in with comments and suggestions, which is great. And much appreciated. Anita?
So these volunteers right now are just to kind of shepherd the RFP process.
No, actually, the volunteers now, I was turning to that, are volunteers for people who are going to be, because we'll shepherd the RFP process, the select board, in terms of selecting the search committee, but the volunteers are for then, who do we want on the search committee to start going, when we start getting resumes and et cetera, to go through the resumes, interview the candidates, et cetera. That's what the volunteer is for, and that's what the search committee is for.
Sorry, I meant the volunteers on the select board for the RFP. You're like,
Right.
Then we might reshuffle, or we might reconsider what that looks like, or are we keeping the 2 people who work on the RFP are going to be potentially part of like the search committee and as with the volunteers?
No, we can reshuffle.
Volunteered for the RFP.
Pardon? Scott?
I voted for the RFP, to be clear, not for the whole process.
Okay, there you go. In terms of, I don't know if you want to start talking about this tonight or what, but in terms of the committee, the committee itself, the search committee that actually starts to review and interview candidates, sort of how many people do we want on it? Who do we want representation from? And should we start soliciting volunteers from the community? Because I do think we want community members on it. I do know I asked Jody to pull the information from the last time we did this 14 years ago. And it was a committee of 9 members. 4 or 5 were residents. I can't remember off the top of my head now. I looked at this earlier today, but now I can't remember. But 4 or 5 were residents. There was a representative from the select board. There was a representative from the FinCom. There was a representative from the I'm trying to think, just from the town in general, representing the town departments in general. And I honestly can't remember the last one. Jody, you probably have it in front of you, so you can tell me.
I don't have it in front of me. But the planning board, because you were on that, Andrea.
Oh,
if you remember, you represent the planning board, huh?
Okay.
And I think the school
committee had a representative.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the moderator was on it, who was Ellen Hardy at the time.
I don't think so, Jody.
Well, she wrote me a note and told me she was. So
I'll look at the committee again.
Okay.
I don't remember her being on it, to be honest. But I'll look at
I'm not going to argue that.
So anyway, just food for thought in terms of, how we want to comprise the committee and what we, folks who we want to be on the committee. And we can then start reaching out to folks. So you can give it some thought and we can talk about it at our next meeting, if that works for folks. Okay, sounds good. All right. We are at board reports and updates. Does anybody have any board reports and updates? Okay, don't see any minutes for approval. We have minutes from May 10th, 2022 for our regular session for release. So is there a motion to approve and release?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have, we're up for town manager's report. Okay, we have 15 contracts that have been listed here. With the permission of the board, let me ask this, does anybody have any questions? I'm just looking at the contracts right now. Does anybody have any questions about the contracts that are listed on our agenda tonight? Okay, Anita and then Scott.
Sorry to pick on the health department and Ray, but just because that was part of the revised agenda that stuck out. But those 20 picnic tables, like, where are they going to go?
Actually, Anita, those are purchase orders. Can we wait till we get to purchase orders?
Oh, sorry.
But I have the same question, so let's wait till we get to purchase orders, okay? Scott?
Actually, maybe I made a mistake. My question is on again, not to pick on poor Ray, but the signs. I'm kind of curious what.
Yep.
So, okay.
Okay, let's wait for that. Let's just focusing on the contracts themselves. So I don't see any questions about the contract. So is there a motion to approve the contracts as listed on our June 28th agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Scott? Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we're at the purchase orders. And Anita, your question, and let me just piggyback on your question so that Ray can answer both of them at the same time. Not only are where they going to go, but 20 picnic tables for $22,000. I mean, that's more than $1,000 per picnic table. What are these picnic tables made out of? Okay, that they're costing more than $1,000 each. I'd like to have an understanding of that. And I'd also like to have an understanding of not only where are they going to go, but what's the purpose of them? And is this the best use of $22,000? So with those questions, as well as Anita's, Ray, if you could respond, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. So we received a COVID-related grant from DPH for $111,000. It's a regional grant between the town of Acton, Dracut, and the town of Westford. So we were awarded this grant in February, and we just received the funding last week. So the state has given us a week and a half to spend down this funding. As part of a number of items that we're able to purchase besides test kits, medical supplies, which we are certainly have been purchasing with this money. One of the items is picnic tables that municipalities can purchase. Acton has asked for 16 picnic tables, which are ADA compliant, that they're putting throughout their community. Westford has requested 4, 2 for the library, one of which is ADA compliant, and 2 for town hall. The reason of the price, they're recycled plastic hexagon picnic tables. So Westford is getting 4 of those tables. What happens is, because we're the host agent, we are purchasing all these products for all of these communities, and they are being covered under a grant. The emergency sign is a regional.
Wait,
sign.
stop,
Oh,
Ray,
sorry.
stop, don't go there, don't go there yet.
Okay.
These 20 picnic tables, where are they being delivered? I guess my question is.
Sure, they're being delivered to the town of Acton. And we are working with our department and our facilities department to pick up our 4 tables that need to be put together.
Okay. And then you said that the grant was for $111,000?
Correct.
Okay. So after spending this 525, and is the sign coming out of the same grant?
It is.
So after those 2 expenditures, is there money left in this grant?
There is about $17,000, which is an admin fee that will go directly to the town of Westford as the host agent, that will go back to the general fund. And then the remaining money is being spent on things like portable ADA, lots of medical supplies for all of these communities, everything from Band-Aids to clinic supplies. We ordered wheelchairs for emergency preparedness. We have a whole list of items that we have purchased with this COVID-related funding.
Okay, so basically, with the expenditures of these funds and the 17,000, we will have spent the money, the grant money. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, Jody.
So Ray, just to clarify, the other purchases you're making, they aren't over 10,000 for a single vendor?
Correct.
Okay, so by our charter, a any contracts have to come to the select board, and a purchase order over 10,000 is considered a contract. So that's why these two are on your agenda.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then now we can talk about the sign. So Scott had a question. So go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I guess just curious because we have, a sign already with the highway department for, town use. And so I was kind of curious what this sign would be used for, that we had to have a second one floating around for that kind of money. It was all.
Sure, no, absolutely. So speaking with all the communities, we have 2 meetings a month since February, is, like I said, as this funding was given to us. And we looked at lots of different items that all 3 communities needed. One was this emergency sign. We talked to Steve Cronin at our highway department to see if we could store this particular sign. It's a regional sign. Westford would have access, as well as Drake and Acton. It is a small solar portable sign that comes with a hitch and all the bells and whistles, if you will. We certainly understand Westford's policy that we, don't want to use this sign for every clinic or anything like that. This would be for emergency purposes. Again, storms, things like that. It's just an extra sign that's available to all 3 communities.
Okay, so Ray, you do understand that, you can't, if we approve this in Westford, at least, you can't just put the sign out without approval from the select board.
Correct. We completely understand the policy here in Westford, and we're not looking to use the sign, for, like I said, for clinics or anything. This is emergency purposes only. It's an extra piece of equipment that's being paid through the grant.
Well, I guess on a personal level, since we already have a sign and we have electronic signs, I'm having a problem that this is the best use of grant money for this particular expenditure. Jody?
Just to be clear, we do have 2 signs.
2 signs, right.
They are the large emergency signs, and we actually are prohibited from using them except for emergencies. However, you did just authorize us to use it for town meeting, and no one complained on that. But I did speak to Ray, and she does understand that, this new sign should only be used for emergencies too. So, but I wanted to clarify, we do have 2. So this would be a 3rd.
Well, as I said, since we have 2 and they can only be used for emergencies, I have an issue with this expenditures. I don't know that it's the best use of the grant funds for this. Scott?
Yeah, that's just my feeling as well, that I get it's a grant and that it doesn't directly impact Westford taxpayers, but it does ultimately. Someone's paying for this in some level of government. And is there something else we could spend that 20 grand on that would be, more useful for Westford residents than a sign that becomes what a backup to a backup?
Tom, go ahead. And then I have a question from Christina Green that might help out too. So go ahead, Tom.
So absolutely understand the point Scott's making about it all comes from taxpayers. In this situation, because this coalition requested the grant and received the grant, I guess I would give a little more deference towards the jointly agreed use for the grant that they joined together on and successfully got. So in my own mind, I'm more inclined to give deference in this case because they've done the work. They've come up with a coalition. They've made this recommendation after consideration amongst them. So I understand the point, but I would choose to give deference here.
All right, I have a question from Christina Green from the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is being asked for money for defibrillators this Friday. Are defibrillators a possibility with this DPH grant? Ray, is that something that you can answer?
Sure. So we did order 2 portable ADA defibrillators as part of this grant. And so they equal a little over $6,000 for both.
Okay, but Christina's question is that the finance committee is being asked for money for, I guess, additional defibrillators. And can we fund those additional defibrillators with this DPH grant?
We certainly
Jody?
could. Mhm.
Jody?
Yes, so actually, I just learned this week that the fire chief told me that he has some defibrillators that are deficient and they need to be replaced now, which is why he was going to the finance committee. So if Ray is able to cover that, that's certainly, there is a necessity for that right now.
Yeah, I can certainly check. I was not aware that this was something that the community needed. And I can certainly ask. As I said, this sign is not just for Westford, it's for the town of Dracut and Acton.
And it's going to be, if it's approved, it's going to be stored here in Westford?
It is. So they asked us, we're the host agent, if we would be willing to store this. And speaking with the highway department, they said this would not be a problem to have it delivered there and they would store it there.
And assume if that happens and if Dracut or Acton wants to use it, how do they get it?
So they would contact our department. We would contact highway and let them know that they were coming, and they would need to supply their own means of picking it up and bringing it back in the same condition.
Okay. Anita?
I'm appreciative for Christina Green listening in on our meeting and offering the suggestion for these defibrillators. Because I feel like if that is something, Ray, that the other towns would also be in support of purchasing, then it sounds like it's a great fit. But I do also agree with Tom that if all the towns agreed on this particular solar message board, then I'm inclined to support that too.
Scott?
Yeah, so I think one thing we should probably have is the fire chief talk to health department, because my guess is if what Ray would buy would be, defibrillators for a public place, right? Which would be for a layman to use. And what the fire department may need is paramedic level grade ones. So before we think we can just sort of swap them around, I think we need to compare and make sure that we're looking at apples and apples, because my guess is we aren't.
Okay. I think that makes sense. And I think as Ray said, because this is a community grant, it sounds like, Ray, if we were to change this to the purchase of defibrillators, you need to check with your colleagues in Acton and Dracut. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I would need to check with them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, let's vote on, let's take the first two and then separate out the two for the health department, because I think that there are different votes, to be honest. We've got a purchase, and I'll read these two. We have a purchase order for the American Alarm for installation of new surveillance cameras in the amount of $36,285.84 as requested by the Facilities Department, and the purchase order for Process Distributors Inc. for constant chlor plus dry chlorinator briquettes in the amount of $32,000 as requested by the Water Department. So is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Tom?
Aye.
John? John?
Aye.
I know it's getting late. I'm sorry. Anita?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Okay. Then we have a purchase order for the park catalog for 20 picnic tables in the amount of $22,525.28 as requested by the Health Department. And I just want to make clear for anybody who's watching still that 4 of those tables are coming to Westford and 16 are going to the town of Acton. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? No, we're already on a second. Okay. Okay. All those in favor? Scott,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Anita,
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. And then, do we want to hold on the last one and well, actually, and see if, have Ray and our fire chief talk and have Ray go back to her colleagues in Acton and Drake before we vote on the sign? It's Tom? Jody?
Jody may have a more substantial comment. I think it's now that we've identified this important community need, I think it would be useful to have Ray see if that's also a shared need and explore that. And then we can vote on whatever recommendation they come back with next time.
Jody?
So what my understanding from Ray is she needs to spend this money by June 30th. So she cannot come back July 12th.
Correct. Unfortunately, the state just cut the check to the town for this money last week. So we only had a week and a half. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of the other defibrillator issue.
Scott, did you have your hand up or have you put it down?
I have, Jody, answer my question. The question was, how long do we have for Ray to
Okay.
work with? The answer is not much time.
Yeah, not much. So it appears we may be, Scott?
I guess the only option is, it's Tuesday night. I mean, if Ray was really fast and had discussion tomorrow with the fire chief or colleagues, we would have time to post a meeting for Friday, but that's about all we can do.
July.
Yeah, Friday's July.
And then Friday is July 1st.
Yeah.
So Ray, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a comment or just?
Well, I just wanted to say that, like I said, a little under $17,000 comes back as an admin fee as part of, the town can do whatever they want with it. It's only a suggestion. I don't know how this works, but we can certainly forward that money towards the defibrillators for the fire department. I don't know if that helps or makes sense, but it all goes back to general fund. I don't know how that works, but we could certainly, that's an option.
Is that a possibility, Jody? Do you know off the top of your head or not? You're sort of looking.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, but what I would say is if Ray has 17,000, give or take, that we can put towards defibrillators, then if the board wants to agree with that, at least if that's what happens, then I can have that agreement to move forward with that before the 30th. I mean, that's kind of stretching it a little bit, but I think that would be legitimate if it's doable. I don't know if it's doable. So, but at least you'd give us authority, because I believe the thing is, Scott, is there's defibrillators in the ambulance and there's other defibrillators, which is hard for me to say, but I believe he needs both kinds. But I know he told me, I believe they're around $4,000, the ones he's going to FinCom for. So anyway, I don't know if this is doable. We'll have to try to figure it out. But if the board supports it, I think you could let us know that.
Okay. All right. So what's the pleasure of the board? Is there a motion to approve the signs along with a recommendation that we use if $17,000 is coming back to the town? Actually, let me do it in two separate motions. Is there a motion to approve the $16,050 for the road sign?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John, Scott,
Aye.
I'm voting no. All right. Also, is there, and so now is there a motion or, Jody, do you want a motion or just kind of direction?
I think a motion would be helpful.
Is there a motion to authorize Jody to look into whether we can use the approximately $17,000 that's going to come back to the town as an administrative fee for the purchase of defibrillators for the fire department?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, Tom?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Anita?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
If it works out, thank you, Ray.
Yes. Okay, grants. Ray, I just have one question for you on the grant. It's just a clarification. So the $295,872.
Yes.
That's a second installment, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's year 2. Yep.
Okay, all right. And again, that's shared services with towns?
4 towns, Acton, Lowell, Dracut, and Westford. Shared services grant.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just needed that clarification.
Sure.
I have a couple of other questions just about it, but they're not germane to this vote, and I can follow up with you separately and offline. Okay, is there a motion to approve the 4 grants as listed in our agenda tonight?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? John?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 3. Thank you. I can't
3.
count anymore. 3. John said aye. Anita?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So a motion to waive reading of correspondence?
So moved.
So moved.
Come on, guys.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hands. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you all very much. I know it's been a long meeting. There was a lot to talk about. A lot of people were interested and had comments, so I appreciate everybody's input and participation. Everybody have a great rest of the night. Good night, Westford. Stay safe.
Have a great holiday.